It's a tough one today. This one hits hard.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Jordan Neely case.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think a lot of people can picture themselves in. Being on a crowded subway, somebody's acting a little erratically. What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
This situation, unfortunately, ended in tragedy. Jordan Neely lost his life, and you've asked us to look into it.
Yeah.
And we've got a whole stack of articles, legal documents, even some analysis from Tex Kevin.
Yeah, Tex Kevin is a great resource for this kind of stuff.
Really helps unpack this situation.
It's tough. I mean, it's not about pointing fingers here. It's about trying to, understand what happened, just a very complex situation. So we just want to, lay it all out for you guys, explore different perspectives, and hopefully you walk away and you've formed your own conclusion about this really, really impactful event.
Yeah, and I think to start, the media labeled Jordan Neely as, a homeless man.
Right.
But there's so much more to a human being than just, one label. I mean, he was a complex individual.
Yeah. He had a past. And that really helps us understand who he was.
Right. And this wasn't just a guy surviving on the streets. This was somebody who was actually pretty well known in Times Square. Jordan Neely was a Michael Jackson impersonator.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Brought a lot of joy to the people with his performances. But he also had a very difficult past.
Right. And his life took a really bad turn after he allegedly witnessed his mother's murder as a teenager.
Oh, wow.
It's hard to even imagine the kind of trauma that inflicts on somebody that young,
Yeah.
And, articles from The Independent, CNN, they talk about how his family believes that led to a lot of his struggles with mental health.
Right.
Which sadly, led to him being in and out of shelters, jail, and hospitals.
And that's a really important point to touch on, It's just highlighting some of the systemic failures that we see, especially when we talk about addressing homelessness and mental health.
Yeah.
Sadly, it just feels like sometimes people slip through the cracks.
And they're unable to get that consistent long-term support that they really need.
Yeah, so let's talk about the actual incident,
Okay.
And it took place on a crowded subway car. And I don't know about you, but I find subway cars to be stressful just in general.
Yeah, me too.
Especially in a big city like New York. You're packed in there like sardines.
Absolutely.
And, witnesses say that Neely was acting erratically. He was allegedly yelling about being hungry, thirsty, and ready to die.
Yeah. And it's really important to point out that we've got different sources that offer different accounts of what exactly happened. Some witnesses claim that he was threatening passengers,
right,
while others have said that he wasn't physically attacking or harming anyone.
So we have this, kind of chaotic scene playing out.
Yeah.
And that's when Daniel Penny, who's a Marine veteran, allegedly intervenes and places Neely in a chokehold. And this is where things take a turn for the worse.
A very sad turn. Witnesses have stated that this chokehold continued after Neely appeared to have lost consciousness.
Wow.
Yeah. And the medical examiner later ruled his death a homicide caused by compression of the neck.
And so obviously this sparks a whole legal battle.
Absolutely.
Which we're going to get into. So Penny was charged with second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide.
Mm-hmm.
And he's pleaded not guilty. And he says that he was acting in self-defense and that he never intended to kill Neely.
Right. And what's so interesting is how the legal system really has to grapple with these concepts of self-defense.
Right.
Because you have the prosecution arguing that while his initial intervention might have been justified, they say that the prolonged nature of the chokehold, especially after Neely became unresponsive, was beyond what is legally considered necessary to protect yourself.
And this is one of those cases where it becomes more than just like a courtroom drama.
Oh, absolutely.
Protests erupt. Media coverage is just constant. It brings up these larger issues like vigilantism, racial disparities in the justice system, and the complex ways that systemic inequality manifests in our society.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, so much to unpack.
I mean, the trial itself was like a really long and difficult process, full of emotional testimony, conflicting accounts of what happened.
Right.
It really felt like the whole nation was watching this thing unfold.
And after weeks of deliberation, the jury couldn't come to a unanimous decision on the manslaughter charge. It was a deadlocked jury, and the judge dismissed that charge.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about what a deadlocked jury actually means. It shows just how complex this case really was.
Right.
Because the jurors couldn't all agree on whether Penny's actions actually met that legal definition of manslaughter.
Right.
Which requires proving that intent to cause serious harm.
Right. But the trial continued, right?
Right.
Focusing on that remaining charge of criminally negligent homicide.
Right.
So for our listeners out there, can you break down what the difference is between those two charges?
Sure. So, like, manslaughter implies that there was a conscious disregard for human life,
Right.
whereas criminally negligent homicide focuses more on actions that were reckless or careless,
Okay.
but without the intent to kill. So it's subtle, but it's a really critical distinction in the eyes of the law.
So despite the prosecution's arguments that Penny's actions went beyond reasonable self-defense, the jury acquitted him
Yeah.
of the criminally negligent homicide charge as well.
And, this really sparked a lot of strong reactions from both sides.
Yeah.
Some people felt that it showed some sort of bias in the justice system,
Right.
while others really believed that it was the right outcome based on all the evidence that was presented.
Right.
And, the legal definition of self-defense.
Right. And I think it's important for us to say, we support the police.
Absolutely.
And we know that their job is incredibly tough.
Yeah, they have a really tough job.
And they do so much to keep our community safe.
Right.
But this case has also brought up, these discussions about accountability within law enforcement.
Absolutely.
When it comes to potential misconduct.
Yeah.
So there has to be consequences for wrongdoing, and there has to be a commitment to reform to ensure that justice is served fairly.
Transparency and accountability are so crucial.
Yes.
And we have to be advocating for these systems that protect the rights of all citizens.
So the verdict in the criminal case isn't the end of the story.
Right.
Jordan Neely's family has filed a civil lawsuit against Daniel Penny, and they're seeking damages for wrongful death.
And this is a pretty common thing that families in these types of situations do.
Right.
It's a way to seek justice through a different kind of lens.
Right.
Because a civil lawsuit doesn't have to focus on proving criminal guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But instead, it's about proving that the defendant's actions directly led to the victim's death.
Right.
And that they should be held financially responsible.
So even though Penny was acquitted in the criminal trial, he could still be found liable in civil court.
That's exactly right. The burden of proof in civil cases is much lower.
Right.
So it's about proving negligence or wrongful actions, even if there was no intent to kill.
Right.
And if the jury in this civil case does find Penny liable, he could be ordered to pay damages to Neely's family.
So this kind of brings us to this broader conversation about what the role of these lawsuits is in cases like this. Why do you think it's important for families to have this option?
I think it provides an avenue for families to seek accountability.
Right.
Even when the criminal justice system doesn't deliver what they perceive as justice,
Good.
It's a way to bring attention to the harm that was caused and to
Right.
potentially, create financial consequences for the defendant's actions.
Right.
And I think it also allows the family to honor the memory of their loved one by pursuing this legal action.
I think that's a really powerful point. It really acknowledges the pain and loss suffered by the family.
Yeah.
But also sends a message that there are consequences.
Absolutely. And in a lot of cases, a successful civil suit can actually result in policy changes
Oh, wow.
or reforms aimed at preventing similar tragedies.
Right. And I think one thing that we can't lose sight of in these legal proceedings is the human cost. You know?
Absolutely.
Jordan Neely was a person.
Yeah.
He was someone's son. He had hopes and dreams.
Right.
His life was tragically cut short, and no legal outcome can bring him back.
No, that's the really sad truth. I think we often get caught up in the details of the legal proceedings.
Right.
And we forget that there's a human being at the center of this. Jordan Neely's life mattered.
And this case forces us to confront some uncomfortable realities about our society. We failed people like Jordan Neely.
Yeah, his story really highlights the invisible struggles that people experiencing homelessness and mental health challenges have to face every day.
We have to find a way to create a safety net that catches people before they fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's about recognizing that mental health is health.
Right.
Homelessness is a solvable problem,
It is.
and everyone deserves dignity and support.
And fostering a sense of shared responsibility.
Yes.
We can't turn a blind eye to the struggles of others.
Right.
We need to create communities where people feel safe seeking help, and where those who are struggling are met with compassion and understanding.
So before we go any deeper into some of those systemic issues, let's pause here for a moment. Share this deep dive.
Yeah.
Leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more explorations of these complex and important topics. It's easy to get caught up in the legal back and forth.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important in a case like this to zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
This tragedy exposes so many, like, systemic issues
Absolutely.
that we just can't ignore as a society.
You're absolutely right. I mean, this isn't just an isolated incident.
Right.
This is something we see all the time. Jordan Neely's story is sadly not unique. And it really intersects with so many of those facing homelessness and mental health challenges.
Yeah. One of the most disturbing things that I found in our research was that Jordan Neely was on the city's top 50 list. Do you know about this?
Tell me a little bit more about that. I'm not familiar.
Okay, so this list identifies individuals who are deemed the most at risk and most in need of psychiatric intervention.
Wow.
So he was on their radar.
Yeah.
Like they knew.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's so disturbing.
Yeah, and it just raises so many questions about, like, why the system failed to provide him with that consistent long-term care
Right.
that he clearly needed to be safe and get better.
Yeah, it's like we're aware of the problem.
Right.
We're trying to identify the people who are most at risk.
Right.
But then there's no follow-through. It's like a Band-Aid on a gaping wound.
Yeah. And, we need like a complete overhaul of how we approach these situations as a society. Like, we need increased funding, affordable housing. Mm-hmm.
And these programs that offer that long-term support and stability.
It can't just be like a bed for the night and then you're back on the street.
Right. It's about providing people with a way to rebuild their lives.
Therapy, medication, job training.
Yeah. All the things that can actually help a person
Right.
get back on their feet and become a productive member of society.
And I think we also need to talk about the role of law enforcement
Absolutely.
in these situations.
Yeah.
And it is delicate
Yeah.
because we want to support law enforcement.
Yeah. They have a really tough job.
But we also need to hold them accountable
Right.
if things go wrong.
We need to make sure that they're properly trained
Yeah.
to handle situations like this.
Hi.
Because the goal should always be to de-escalate the situation.
To protect life
Yeah.
and to help people.
Right. Not to make things worse.
And I keep thinking about that video footage of the incident on the subway.
It's hard to watch.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, it brings up all these questions about, like, what would I do if I was there?
It makes you think, right?
Yeah. Like, what's the role of a bystander?
Yeah.
What's our responsibility
Absolutely.
when we see somebody who's in crisis?
Right.
And I think we need to do a better job of educating the public
Absolutely.
about mental health resources,
Yes.
about how to help, who to call.
Right, because we need to create a culture where people aren't afraid to seek help.
Yeah.
And they're met with compassion instead of judgment or fear.
And we can't bring back Jordan Neely.
We can't.
And that's so sad.
Yeah.
But I hope that his tragic death can be a catalyst for change.
Yeah, me too.
A turning point in how we address all of these challenges as a society.
I think we owe it to Jordan Neely, to countless others like him, to really strive for a better future.
Yes.
Where mental health is prioritized, homelessness is tackled, and people are treated with dignity and respect.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the Jordan Neely case. I know this is a heavy one, but it's one that we had to do. And it brought to light a lot of really important things.
Yeah.
As always, do your own research, talk about this with your friends, engage with this topic.
Yeah.
And as always, like, comment, share, and subscribe.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.